It works. Here we go.
Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. No issues. The soundboard has been ridiculous, and shows have been having a hard time going live, not just with us, but anyone who uses this platform. So, officially, welcome to the Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't do it without you, nor would we want to. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justice Sticker, for his contribution of his voice, his time, and his music for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but does commission pieces of any sort. So tonight we welcome back Jack Roth. Yeah, you notice, guys, that I put up his last segment on his second film that we covered last week, or the last time he was on. But this one here is a real doozy. Extraordinary the Revelations. I have to say, I did put a link up for people to watch in case they haven't, just to sort of prep you all for tonight. And I have to say, it's probably by far one of my favorite documentaries, and I can't wait to get into it. So without further ado, we're going to bring on Mr. Jack Roth. Hello, hello. How are you?
Hey, good. Can you hear me, Michelle?
I can
Okay.
hear you. I wasn't even sure we'd make it live on time because the people all over the place who use this platform that was having issues. You'd think with a corporate account you wouldn't have to worry about things like that. Apparently you do. But we went off without a hitch. Here you are. We hear you, and it's great. And Amelia's under the weather, just like ah.
Oh no.
I know she's having a rough go of it. So we're sending her love and light and well wishes and all of that. And, hopefully she's able to listen in. So I've watched the show again, and I love the show. I love the show. It is so well done. You left nothing out, no stone unturned. For those of us who are in the field and who go back to ancient origins and all the way through, I watched it for my first time originally, and I thought, it's going to leave something out. Not everybody gets everything, but you got everything.
Yeah, it's kind of we kind of approached Extraordinary as a trilogy. So,
Right.
and that's important for people. Now, the films stand on their own, but it really is a trilogy. And, obviously we start with the first one with one guy's story, one man's story. The second one we talked about, we did the show on that.
Yes.
The unexplained pregnancies and it more than hinted at the fact that there are hybridization programs occurring,
Yes.
which is fascinating in and of itself. But what in the third one, in the final one in the series, we really wanted to put it all together.
Right.
So we and kind of talk about, okay, if this is happening, and
Right.
there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it is.
Yes.
Why? So what's the end game? What, let's talk about, it's what the end game could be, and really what we wanted to focus on. There's three schools of thought on that. There are three paradigms, if you will, when
Right.
it comes to why might this be happening. And it's not, some of it's not easy to listen to. So but the three, in just to share with your audience, it's the colonization kind of paradigm, school of thought, where it's
Mm.
not positive, it's not benevolent, it's more malevolent, it's about colonizing the planet, it's about replacing us with hybrids. And the main person we talked to about that was Dr. David Jacobs, who's done an extraordinary work in his career. Extraordinary.
Yeah.
And he was a John Mack, he worked with John Mack, and it's amazing. Bud Hopkins,
He's
and
the guy, right?
oh, it's just amazing. But he was
Yeah.
honest. I mean, he was brutally honest. And he
Oh,
says,
yeah.
I have to tell you, as a PhD, based on my research, I don't think it's good, which is totally understandable. So, but we wanted to, our job was to share these paradigms. So we have that one. And then we have the ascension paradigm, which is basically the opposite of that. It's benevolent, it's positive, it's, they're helping us to uh, go to our next level of evolution,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's through these hybridization programs, or they're helping us, and these are benevolent species of ETs that are doing it. And
Right.
then the third paradigm is a biblical paradigm, and
Mhm.
that's basically means what it says. Basically, that's what it is. It's basically taking the Bible and
Right.
saying that everything in the Bible is actually where they're talking about ETs. So instead of talking about, like, whether it's demons or whatever
Mhm.
they're talking about in the Bible,
Mhm.
and it's actually ETs that are manipulating it instead
Right.
of demons, and that it's the second coming of Jesus, literally, that's going to stop these ETs from doing what they want to do. Now, that
Mhm.
is obviously very biblical. So you have to really interpret the Bible a certain way in order to be from that school of thought. But we
Right.
were lucky in that we got the people we got to talk about, because they're really, everyone was phenomenal in this. All of our interviews,
Yes.
it was hard to edit because there was so much good stuff,
I know.
so much good stuff. So then
Yes.
we took that base of the three paradigms, and then at the front end, we went over the historical kind of a timeline of putting it all together, of starting with ancient, the
Yes. Which is my one of
Neolithic.
my favorites. Yes.
Yeah, the artwork, it's very much ancient alienish, but like a
Yes.
very, we go through that pretty quickly.
Mhm.
And then my favorite part of it is the military whistleblowers.
Right.
And we got three guys, and we could talk about all this, but just
Yes.
an overview of the film,
Right.
talking about, well, we were actually involved in ET related programs.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was, to this day, that affected me the most. That is the convinced me more than anything else that this stuff's real.
Mhm.
And again, we can get into detail on what these guys talked
Oh,
about,
oh,
but like,
we
yeah,
shall.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
But I
that's a
like that you
basic,
had
yeah.
Michael Salas on there, so you kind of touched on exopolitics a little bit too.
Exopolitics,
Yeah.
and then Nick Pope talked about
Yes.
that as well a little bit. He talked about, like, the government, and the kind of the language of UFOs. UFOs all of a sudden is UAP,
Right.
and the language has changed a little bit. So why is the language changing a little bit? And this actually means something. There's, whether it's spoon feeding disclosure,
Right.
or they're doing, the government. When I say they, it's governments,
Right.
mostly US, very powerful, the most powerful
Right.
governments, that they control the narrative on these things.
Right.
So that was fascinating. That was, yeah, like I said, everyone in this, like, it was ridiculous. It was like, oh my god, yeah, we asked the right questions, and we're proud of that, because we did ask the right questions,
You did.
and it's the stuff that came out was just incredible.
You did. You did. You asked the right questions. You covered all of the basis. And I personally love, I go back to ancient beginnings, the very root of everything, no matter what I research. I've done entire shows on UFOs and all the ancient, going back to the Dogon tribe and go back to Tepe. And I mean, you can just go back miles and miles just on that. There's so much that people just have no idea. So let's start then. Going back into the ancient origins, the very beginnings, I do agree. You have all of these ancient cultures with a crazy amount of oral history because it's all they had. You know, we are seeing cultures all over the world who have no communication with each other, and you've touched on that as well, who all have hieroglyphs, petroglyphs, huge monuments, statues. I mean, it's all there. What's your take?
Yeah, and listen, it's you got to be careful. You can interpret cave drawings
Yes.
any way you want.
Yes.
And I spent a good amount of time in the American Southwest.
Yes.
So I've seen the Anastasi, the petroglyphs and the wall art and all these things. And yeah, some of it, and you just have to you have to look at all of it and then say, okay, what could these back then, and now that was 700-800 years ago. And you go back 40,000 years ago to some of the cave drawings, and then it's like, well, wait, that looks like a helmet. That looks like some antennas coming out of this guy's head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, were they rituals? Were they putting on headdresses? Were they doing dances? Were they doing, whatever they were doing?
The Dogons did.
And you have to consider that they may have been wearing costumes to some effect or whatever.
Yes.
But then there's that looks awful like a daylight disc, like a disc UFO, disc-shaped UFO. And it's like, what in the world could they? Because when if they drew bison or they drew elk or they drew bears, they look like bears.
Right.
Bison.
Well, they emulated what they saw and experienced.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So who were the people? And some of it is obviously them. And then it's like, what were they seeing? And then when you talk about the oral tradition, then you get into them talking about the sky people. There's so many just in Native Americans in North America and South America. When you talk about, and it's everywhere, Australia, all ancient peoples. A lot of them talk about the sky people, or they call them different things, but they came from the stars, etc.
Yes. Yes.
Again, being careful in that, like, how are they interpreting what they see? I get that. And then some of it is blatant. Like some of it, they show a spaceman. Like, you go down to South America and they show a guy literally in a spacesuit, breathing from a spacesuit, sitting in a spacecraft.
Yes.
And this is the ancient Inca or Aztec or whatever, and you're like,
pretty sophisticated.
Else could that be? What could that be?
Right.
So again, and we've talked about this, Michelle, like when we do these documentaries, we feel like it's our job to document and share.
Yes.
We don't say one thing over another, and that's why we looked at all three paradigms. We look at everything and we let the audience decide what they want to decide and do their own research.
Right.
So for us as documentary filmmakers, that's what we do. But when you ask personally what you think, I say there's got to be something to that, because it's again a guy in a spacesuit in an apparatus in a rocket ship, and it's clear as day that's what it is. and you're like, okay, what were they experiencing? Which then begs the question, what kind of contact was it? Right. And then you start thinking, was it just in the sky what they were seeing, but they were actually seeing people in spacesuits or some kind of apparatus? And so what was happening? Was there contact, and what was that contact like? And then it gets, and you take it from there, and then you take that and you bring it to modern day with people being abducted. And you're asking, were they doing that 40,000 years ago to Neanderthals? I mean, who knows? And then there's the big DNA question with that. like you go back to the missing link, like how did we take that leap from what we were to what we are now? And it could just be evolution. I get that. But you have to think about,
Some of it might be, but not all of it.
was there manipulation?
I think so. Yes. Yes. I
Right.
think a
So
lot of people actually leaning towards that. Let's face it, there's an awful big jump in there. And I think that we have to consider the fact that there would have been some sort of manipulation. There had to have been. There's just no way you can jump ahead that fast.
and then the question becomes, which is what we look at in the film, is why? What's the end game? Is there an end game to this? If there's an agenda, and I think this is important for people to understand what we learned by talking to a lot of the military whistleblowers. All right, these are guys that are military, and they were part of certain programs that involved ET communication in one way, shape, or form. So after years of remaining silent, they finally come out when they're older, much older. Clifford Stone is an amazing example of that. And he passed away after we made the film, and we cherished that time we had with him, that day we had with him at Roswell, because that's where we interviewed him. But it was so emotional, because here's a guy who's been through everything and is an ex-military Vietnam guy, and he's crying, telling us the emotional toll it took on him to keep quiet. And he was part of a crash retrieval team. And he would go to these sites. They were the first ones there, and they see the crash, and he saw ET bodies.
Right.
I mean, no reason for this guy to lie. No reason for this guy to make it up. When you're looking at someone in the same room and you're talking to them, and you see their face, and he's telling the truth, and then you're like, wow. Wow.
Well, he's putting himself out there as well. Why would somebody want to put themselves out there in the public? In his position. There are some people that do want to give all kinds of misinformation. Project Bluebeam. Let's wait for that. But years ahead or months ahead. But I think when you have people like him, it's a matter of they're putting themselves out there, taking a chance on being ridiculed, ruining whatever reputation that they have. They take a lot of risks, because a lot of whistleblowers have ended up deceased, shall we say, missing, and if the very least discredited, like severely, having everything about their life discredited.
Right. Nothing good's going to come of it. It's not like they're going to make a ton of money. That just never happens. Ever happens. And it's usually the ridicule, and their lives are destroyed. With the military guys, what's so interesting about it is that these guys were patriots first. They're patriots. So for them, when it's like, okay, listen, this is top secret. And it was during the Cold War. So for them, it was like, yeah, we agree. We're not going to talk about this, because it could be detrimental to the United States if we talk about these programs. Because again, they're patriots first. So they sign these non-disclosure, whatever they sign, right? And it's usually, listen, if you ever talk about this, you're going to be in prison or worse. So they don't. But as they get older, they realize the psychological toll it's taken on them and their peers and some of the good friends who were involved in these programs. And they realize that people deserve to know what's really going on. Why is it only a few people that are privileged enough to know about it? That's ridiculous. And they get angry about it, and they're getting older. They know they're not going to be around much longer. And then they open up and they talk about it. And that's when you get the information is just incredible that you get from these men and women who are in the military.
Well, because they were so strict about not being able to talk about it. You can go back to stories that go back to the 1700s, with like document storied, 1800s, right in, the United States, even everywhere. But I think there are, World War I pilots and World War II pilots who have stories, and they are giving deathbed confessions because they don't want to take it. They don't want to take it to the grave. They're like, I'm just going to put it out there now. So I don't know, something's going on. I mean, we all know the Nazis were ahead of the game with that, and we all know a lot of those scientists ended up in the United States after the fact. So I think they were doing some sort of back engineering from very early on, or even not so much back engineering, but they had the plans to do it because of these scientists. So, when did it all change? Well, I mean, you have the ancient people who are very accepting of working with, you know, star people and very accepting of it. They talked about it. They coexisted together, and it showed that they could coexist. I mean, there are statues out there in Peru. There's a statue of a big reptilian who helped an entire community during some cataclysm, brought them underground, fed them, educated them, and they there's a statue to this being. The Hopi who talk about the ant people who helped their people. Like it can be done. When did it change that all of a sudden, no, you're not allowed to know about this now?
Right. Power and control.
Yeah.
So, way back, people were more in touch with their spiritual side. And
Right.
certainly anything to do with the cosmos is spiritual. Because
Yes.
even though they're sentient beings, they're different races of whatever they are, they can be more advanced.
Oh yeah.
They can even be higher vibrational.
Right.
But that becomes very much a cosmic kind of metaphysical thing from the standpoint of who are we in the grand scheme of things, right? Those are the big questions that humans want to know.
Yes.
So it's to understand that there's life on other planets, and that sentient life forms have developed on other planets all over not only our galaxy but the universe, is a very intense thing. But for people back, when you go way back, we were so much more in touch with nature and our spiritual essence of who we really were. Even though we were trying to figure that out, we were open to figuring it out. People were really into. That's why we knew so much about astronomy. How do you explain that? Like going back thousands of years, that we knew every star system, and people would talk about, they had the skies mapped out thousands and thousands of years ago, and that was significant to people. It meant something. And even though I think when science came into play, you would think that science would help this, because at some point it is about technology, because it's about these beings being more advanced and being able to come here, being able to communicate with us, whether that's advanced telepathic abilities, being more evolved, but also the technical side of that. How do they get here? How do they communicate? The technology is way advanced, whether they're bending space to get here, they're using wormholes, whatever it might be. So you would think that with science, advancing, that we would be more and more open to that. But the opposite has happened, because I think there's a control factor, and there's also an ego factor. A lot of scientists and PhDs, it's like, well, if there's no evidence whatsoever, or evidence that they consider tangible evidence, they don't want to talk about it, because it can ruin their careers, and they have their,
Of
their
course,
tenure
funding.
at universities, funding,
Yes.
and then the egos get in the way. And
Right.
then people over the years, because of technology and the way things have gone with societies across the globe, we've lost our connection to the earth, to the sky, right?
Yes.
To our spiritual selves, right? To
Yes.
that part of us, that our higher selves, our intuition.
Absolutely.
People had much better intuition back in the day because we used it a lot more.
Well,
Now,
and we weren't
yeah,
corrupted by microwaves and frequencies and towers and satellites and all of this crazy technology. There was no technology. So
right,
you weren't, nobody was jamming up your antenna, so to speak,
right,
right? But
yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, we're not the first kick at the can on this planet. I mean, we can see this through ancient structures. We could see this through anything pre-Ice Age. I think I can't remember if we spoke about this the last time you were on, but I mean, there's actually Stonehenge in Lake Michigan, and there's carved right beside this Stonehenge, and it's all standing. There's this huge rock with a carving of a mastodon on it. It's just like, it's pre-Ice Age, and they're finding out of place artifacts going back millions, if not billions, of years. So they can't hide it all. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
it's it's there. So science has to at some point step in and say, well, we can't hide all this. It is all here. So
And we've been lucky enough, like in our first film we talked to, we always try to get PhDs um,
mm,
in every one of our films
right.
because it's important, and we want open-minded people. And
Mhm.
for example, in the first film we got Claude Swanson, who has since passed, who's a wonderful man. He was a
Mm.
quantum physicist, and he
Right.
was able to look at things and say, listen, now what's happening is we have the 20th century science, the theory of relativity, and all those other things,
Yes.
which are brilliant. Don't get me wrong. Albert Einstein was brilliant beyond belief. These men were amazing, and they knew what they knew.
Right.
You should,
Right.
but they didn't know what they didn't know.
Right.
So science is always evolving, even though it's just, well, it's science. Yeah, but science is always changing. Science, the science of what we know and what we think we might know. So in
Right.
other words, what we think of 100 years ago as science is different than today's science. And quantum physics
Mm.
and these other areas of study where we're talking about space-time continuums and bending space and these these particles that are so small we can't see it. We can't see it, but
Mm.
it's affecting, it's like the 0 point field, which
Right.
is energy. And it's energy in nothing. So it's the void of space where there's energy. So it's like, wait a minute, can we tap into this energy and solve all of our problems, right?
Wouldn't that
Our
be
energy
nice?
problems. Wouldn't that be
Right.
great? But
Right.
the point is with quantum physics and these studies, you're actually, you start to consider, because now you're learning more about the cosmos,
Right.
which we are.
Right.
We're
We are.
looking at black holes. We're looking at all these things, and we're saying, wait a minute, there's more to it. And there always will be more to it. It's just how much we know at a certain point in time.
Right. Science needs to catch up to ancient history. I agree with that.
Listen, it's true because again,
Yes.
I think we
Yes.
were much. I always think, what it would have been like to live 5,000 years ago. First of all, to be able to look at the stars and there's no satellites, there's no airplanes, there's
Mhm.
nothing. So
We used
whatever
to do
you
that back
saw,
in, like, the '70s.
yeah, exactly.
I used
You
to see
know,
all kinds of things in the northern skies. There wasn't no satellites, early '70s.
I'm guilty as charged. You're going to laugh at this. I, listen, I had heard of Starlink and all this stuff that they're doing out there and Elon
Right,
Musk and all this. But I was in New Mexico recently and I didn't really know what that was. Like I was aware of kind of what it was, but we
right,
were doing a night watch in New Mexico, which is of course the best place to do it because there's no lights. It's really dark. So
right.
you can kind of see the Milky Way. All of a sudden this trail of lights
And you
comes
thinking,
across the
"Ah!"
sky. I'm like cursing like a sailor. I'm like, oh, it's a fleet of UFOs. I was so excited because it couldn't be any. Like I'm used to seeing one. If you see a satellite, it's
If
a
you're lucky.
satellite, and it just
Yes.
goes across the sky. And
Right,
if it's pretty much going straight, it's a satellite.
right,
If it starts doing little things, then it's a UFO.
right.
but this was a trail, literally a Starlink.
Right,
And I'm like, oh my God. And the guy next to me is like, dude, that's Starlink. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's the link of satellites that Musk put up there.
right.
That's Starlink. I'm like, oh, I was so
Hey, man, it
embarrassed.
takes a heck of a guy to admit it,
I was
okay?
so embarrassed, and I'm,
Right,
I'm admitting it on air.
right.
But listen, but that's what we're dealing with today. We're
Yes.
dealing with so many different things in the sky that
Mhm.
it's hard to determine what's what.
It does
And
make it
we're
a
all,
lot harder.
yeah, plus we're dealing with the kind of technology that people can mess with photos to the point where you don't know if it's real or
Mm.
not.
Right,
So that's
right.
why it was more, I feel like it was so much more, there was a grounded feeling of
Right.
either it is or it isn't, and you're going to know,
Oh, yeah,
you
I mean,
know.
I grew up in that time up north where you didn't have satellites, and I watched a craft come right down into the valley, land behind the mountains. I was like, "Cool." And then within about 20 minutes, literally it shot up and took off, and next day the military helicopters were all over the valley, and I went, "Ha! Yes, excellent." But back then it's just like, well, what else could it be? It was completely silent. So, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. It's not like, you have normal everyday aircrafts
Right.
or helicopters come through, no drones, nothing like that.
Right. And you know what you're looking at,
Oh yeah.
like, and then that people have to give people more credit.
Right.
That, yes, there are people who hallucinate, but few and far between that is.
Right.
And that's what the excuse in the 70s and 60s and 70s
Oh,
always was. Oh, they're
LSD movement.
hallucinating, they're
Yeah.
crazy, it's like they
Oh,
just
for
don't. It
sure.
was like and then even mass hallucination. You know how
Right.
rare that is?
Right.
And
Right.
psychologists would stand behind that. That was a mass hallucination.
Hallucination.
So 80 people saw a UFO, mass hallucination. I'm like,
Right.
well,
Right.
really? You sure about that? Because that's more ridiculous than saying
Right.
it's an actual UFO.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, you think about it.
It is. It
you know,
is. You kind of sitting there, and it insults your intelligence, really. It's really hard to kind of roll with, with these with the authority, because they really insult the intelligence. We
Mm,
live in a time of all kinds of technology. We have AI, we've got drones, we've got all kinds of things out there, satellites, but we also have these camera phones, right?
right.
And let's face it, now you can just at the palm of your hand, it's like Enoch showed me the world from the palm of their hand, right? Hello. But we have it in the palm of our hand, and we could just snap photos. We can record, audio record. They're like mini computers. This freaking phone has more, like I got a terabyte in my phone, and I have half of that in my freaking brand new Mac. It's like, so I can get a lot of stuff in this phone. And that's the
Right.
point I'm trying to make. It's hard now to say to people, you didn't see anything, because yes, we saw something.
Right.
Was it legit or not? Who knows? But it's something.
It's always changing. The swamp gas was a big one for a long time.
The swamp
Now,
gas.
swamp gas does exist.
Yeah,
We know swamp gas
that's
exists. I've
right.
seen swamp gas,
Right.
and it
Right.
doesn't look like a UFO.
No.
But
No.
like,
No.
but this was that's the agenda. Like, so you could talk about the ET agenda
Right.
and which one it is, and again, we can get more into that. But you
Yes.
also have to talk about government agendas, political
Oh,
agendas,
absolutely. Yeah.
and that's when the government's like, they decided in the 1940s. And maybe it was because of national security. There was two reasons: national security, and they didn't think that the masses could handle anything, that
Right.
we were dumb idiots and they were superior. So it's that elitist mentality of people in power. We're
Right.
better than them, so we better keep it from them because they're going to run naked in the streets if they find out about this. It'll just
Right.
be chaos.
Right.
Of course, there's always going to be some people that don't handle it very well, but for the most part, I think people would handle it quite well,
Right.
and especially nowadays. I think people, it's almost like now people don't care. Like they really literally are like, yeah, there's life on other planets, and they don't think about it anymore.
Right.
Like, it's like,
We're all
probably
good. Yeah.
true, but it's
Kumbaya.
not. Yeah,
Right.
right, exactly. So
Right.
that's the
Right.
problem we have now, is people just are too preoccupied with distraction,
Mhm.
which is government. You better believe that's a real thing that they're doing. It's
Yes.
not just
Yes.
that's on purpose.
100%.
All right, and then
100%.
we're just trying to make a decent salary and feed our kids and have a
Yes.
house that we can afford and not worry about craziness that's going on in the world. But who has time to think about ETs? But there'll always be us. Well,
Right.
because we're free thinkers and we're also incredibly
Yeah.
like, why, what,
Right.
why? There'll
Right.
always be people like that. Thank God.
Yes.
So anyway, I tend to ramble, but these are great conversations to have, Michelle. They really are. And
Yes.
that's the reason we made these films. We made these films so people would sit there afterwards and talk,
Right.
period. You could
Right.
sit there and say, these guys are full of it. This movie stinks. Except we haven't had much of it, thank God, because the movies, whether you believe in some of the things that are included in the films,
Mhm.
whether or not you believe it, they're still good films. Like we wanted to make good films. So it's a question of whether or not people are willing to open their minds and say, what if? What if? That's always our mantra. What if?
Mhm. I think it just opens up, you know, it bends your mind a little bit, and it opens up to other realms of possibilities. We have to look at it that way. I mean, you can go back to even Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry. Why do you think Star Trek was actually created? Gene Roddenberry was believed to have met with who was called the Council of Nine, and it was essentially, something that came into creation because they wanted to see how would the public react to seeing human beings alongside, let's say, extraterrestrial beings, other races from other planets and other places. And we all know how Star Trek went,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh, it's a
and
beautiful vision, and isn't it a beautiful
well,
vision though?
it is. And if there's any truth to it, which a lot of people believe, then it's like, well, you know what? I like it because sometimes when you look at a series like that and you become a big fan of it and you kind of go, I see it, I'm okay with it. So, do we all think that we can coexist? I mean, the ancients coexisted, but when let's talk a little bit about
I have to say, just real quick, and hold on. I
yes,
just like my
go-
partner, Jon Sumple, director of all three of these films,
right.
um, is he's texting me. And
Oh,
I want to give a shout out to
does he want
John
to come on?
because, well, I'm
send,
going to try to
send him the
get
link.
him. Do you mind me sending? Uh,
No, go ahead.
let me just tell him, and he'll go.
Yeah, send him. He can come on.
Can he just come to the site, or how does he have to do that?
No, send him the link that I sent you. If he clicks on it, he'll come right here and he's going to be on screen with us.
Oh, okay. You don't mind me doing that real
No,
quick?
I don't mind.
Okay.
I don't
Because
mind.
I have to say, we're partners for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
And John directed these, and I have to, like we always go over story. We develop the stories, we find the stories together. We're the creative team in this,
Right,
along with Lori Wagner on these three films. She was phenomenal. She just knows so many people in that realm that
right,
she helped phenomenally. She's a great producer.
right.
But John, you can interview all these people and then have 100 hours or 70 hours of interviews that are every second of them is great.
Right.
It takes that director's mind to be able to piece it all
It
together
does.
and make 130 to 145-minute film that really is
Yes.
cohesive and is compelling. And John does that, and he spends hours and hours in the editing room
Right.
doing
They
it. And
weave the
and
magic.
they
Yeah.
do, and I want to just give him a shout out because he's
Yes.
amazing. Let me just do this, and I thank you for bearing with me.
Yeah,
So
just
I'm
just
gonna.
forward the email, tell him to check it out, click on the link, he'll come right here into the studio.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah, tell him, just say, go to your email, click on the link. It's video.
it's
So,
yes, yeah, that might
you
be.
know.
He's in Laos right now.
Oh,
Laos.
so
He's in Southeast Asia, but it's like 9:45 in the morning there, so
oh,
it's all
he'll
good.
be fine.
Yeah, he'll be
Yeah.
good. So go ahead. I'll type in. I'm going to send him the link.
Yeah.
But you were going to say something. I'm so sorry, but I just thought I'd
Um,
give John.
no, I'm
Yeah.
really I'm all for it. I mean, it's a party, more the merrier, So, no, I think it takes a lot. It takes a lot to put together this sort of a film because you do have to hit every aspect. You're not going to please everyone. I think if people, like I'm definitely interested in Dr. Jacobs because I appreciate his perspective on it because he's listening to a lot of people who've had really horrific experiences or they're saying the same thing. His idea of how people figure they all have jobs. We're here because we have jobs. I'm an experiencer and I know I have a job. It's a little bit different than what he's coming up with. I think we all know as experiencers what we have to do, but the fact that he says, well, crowd control, I have to say that threw me. I was like, why? Why crowd control? Out of all the cool things that he's sent here to do, because we all want to think, we're all here to do these fantastic things, but crowd control. Some people would think crowd control because you're taken over, or us enlightened people might think crowd control because some people are just going to see a craft come down, and lose their minds. So
Yeah, and like what you said though, you're never going to make everyone happy, which is why we don't take a stance, which is why we presented the three paradigms. You're going to believe, you might not believe in any of the paradigms because you might not believe ETs are real. Right. So if that's the case, then you can't get to D if you don't even believe A. Right. So what hybrid experiments? There's no one getting abducted. But if you are at that point where you see this is happening and you see it as a possibility, then you logically are going to ask why. What's the end game? What's the agenda? Two of the three paradigms aren't delightful by any means.
Right.
And that's why when you say David Jacobs, he has courage, that guy. Because what he's saying is, I've regressed over 1,000 people. And the story for the most part is always the same. They're not having pleasant experiences when they're being abducted.
Right.
They're first of all, they're being abducted against their will. And only over time are some abductees come to terms with it and they see it more in a positive light.
Right.
Now, I get he's coming from, these people are telling me this.
And he's a PhD?
PhD. He's an academic.
Okay.
And what ends up happening is you have your body of work for your life, for your career. Right. And whether you're John Mack or, Bud Hopkins, whoever you might be. And this is what you've determined based on that, right? Is that, it's not all that great.
Right.
What from a personal standpoint, when you consider all three options, one thing we do have learned, and we learned this from Clifford Stone, we've learned this from Dan Sherman, Lynn Buchanan, all the ex-military guys. There are more than one race of ETs that's been communicating with us and doing whatever contact they have with us. There's more than one.
Absolutely.
That's critical to understanding this, because everyone has a different agenda. Mm-hmm. So what you have to realize, and this is what I believe, is that there's good and bad, that it's both. Right. So you have some who are like, well, we want to colonize, and people talk about the bad, quote unquote, bad reptilians when they talk about that. And what in the world was that?
I don't know. That was not me.
Wow, that was weird. It might have been a reptilian. So anyway, so there's a faction, and many people feel this way. There's a faction of reptilians who are bad. There's also a faction who are really good. But the faction that's bad is just it's ego and really, really negative energy. Right. And all they want to do is control. It's all about control. They want to control us. They want to control the entire galaxy, right? They just want to control everyone. But there are other ET races who know each other and interact with each other, who are very highly advanced, very highly evolved. And I like to throw out the words Arcturians, Palladians, all of this. And all of these races who really are benevolent and want to help us, but they want to help us evolve. They want to help us get to that next level, so we can become galactic neighbors. We can become galactic citizens, so we don't blow each other up. We don't destroy the planet, and we actually get to the Star Trek phase, if you will.
Right. For me, I believe, just in my own experiences with ET, is that they do want to see you use your abilities. They're telepathic beings. That's how they want to communicate. We have it all buried within us. We are beings of energy having a human experience. Therefore, we have all of this package wrapped up in there that we seem to forget how to use. And sometimes I think, for me, they're coming by and just giving me that information. They're giving you those downloads. They're just, come on, wake up.
Right. You're dreaming. It's up to us. Listen, I've been told, and this is very interesting, because you're dead on right with that.
Yes. Thank you.
We are we have to consider that these are higher vibrational beings,
Yes.
meaning they're higher dimensional. They evolve so much that it's less physical, it's less dense.
Right.
And Earth is a very dense place. This is a very difficult place to function.
It is.
We are down here to learn and grow, and it is hard on purpose.
Right.
And I was told, and I believe this, that you have to get to a level, the highest level we can achieve on Earth apparently is 5th dimension. And they say that Earth is doing that now, that the entire planet will become 5th dimensional eventually. But
Right.
that people are able to tap into that 5th vibrational energy.
Sure.
And if you will, okay, to describe it that way. We interviewed 3 military whistleblowers: Clifford Stone, Lynn Buchanan. Well, Clifford Stone was part of the crash retrieval unit. Lynn Buchanan was part of the remote viewing program,
Right.
government remote viewing program. And Dan Sherman was part of an above black communication program in which he was able to communicate with ETs.
Right.
Each one of these men has psychic ability. And that's why they were chosen in the military to become part of these programs. Because whatever contact the government had with ETs, whether it was in 1947 at Roswell or before that,
Right.
they learned very quickly that you're right. It's telepathic. It's higher vibrational. So whoever's going to be communicating with them needs to have psi ability.
Right. Right.
And we all have it within us to reach that level to communicate with them.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it's held back because our the whole, was it the pineal gland?
Yes.
It's blocked because we're so indoctrinated that we don't use it. It's like a muscle we're not using.
You're living in a physical space 9 times out of 10. You're going to do nothing but use your physical senses.
Right.
Right.
Someone
The
just said we have to
telepathic
raise
sense.
our frequency.
Yes,
Right.
we have
And
to
that's
raise our
perfectly put.
frequency, our vibrations, everything. It's all about frequency and vibration.
Yes.
And like sometimes you don't jive with people because they don't match your vibes. And for real, it's how
And
it
you
works.
feel it. And the more sensitive you become, vibration and intuition become so much more part of your everyday being, of your everyday
Yes.
life, because you
Yes.
feel things that you never. I've gone through that. Sometimes doing the work we do,
Mm-hmm.
over time it happens. Like this started happening to me when we started our first documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Actually started before that, when we got into the haunting stuff at first, and because we had some experiences, so that whole thing kind of opened me up.
Right.
And then as we did the ET stuff, it opened up more.
Right.
And the last 2 years of my life have been a whirlwind, and I have abilities now that I never had before. And it's not because I'm this amazing psychic. It's just because I've been
exposed to it.
I've been exposed to it.
Yes.
So, and I think that as the people listening to the show, most likely are people who already understand that, right? And they're like,
Yes.
absolutely, right? And
Yes.
and they put the work in, because there is work you have to put into that,
There
whether it's
is.
meditation, quieting the mind, or
Yes.
just opening your mind.
Right. It's true. It's true. But there's also a very big connection between the paranormal and UFOs and star people, because I've worked in the field and I've done media for 20 years. I've met people from all walks of life, being in front of the camera, being behind the camera, consulting on documentaries, and working in film productions and assisting that way. And you get behind the scenes, and they'll say, well, this is what we're looking for, and here's the information. And I'm kind of like, oh, I would never be made privy to that if I wasn't, consulting on it. So it's been a real amazing journey. But I'll tell you, the connection of people even that have reached out to me and people I have assisted over many, many, many years, at least half of them were experiencers, and they thought they were only having paranormal activity, and they ended up having a mix of everything, including becoming abductees, or what I prefer to say, contactee or experiencers. And Jon is here. Shall we let him in, Jon?
Oh my
Jack,
God.
Jon,
Yes,
Jack.
absolutely.
Jon, Jack, here we go. Hello, welcome.
Well, I bet you didn't think you were going to be coming on.
Hello.
The show.
Well, welcome, welcome.
No, I had to like put a hat on. I had to, wash my face, put my hat on.
It's morning for you. You had to have your cup of coffee.
That's okay. There's only a few million people
Yeah.
watching.
No,
Hey, listen, John, no
Listening.
pressure,
that's
but I
okay.
was just
I'm good.
raving about you as a director, so no pressure.
Right.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
Of course, man. You're my partner. I have to do that.
No, I'm glad. See, but had you mentioned before, we could have done this before.
I know.
Oh no,
Michelle, you're probably going to kill me. I swear. I'm
Jack
so
can do
sorry.
this. Jack can handle this single-handedly. He can handle this
No,
all
he's
by. We've
good.
done so many of these shows. We know our stories and our experiences inside and out. Yeah, you're in good hands with Jack.
Oh, without a doubt. But 2 for 1 is awesome.
One of the things that Michelle, that John could talk about, because we were talking about Clifford, and we were talking about the 3 ex-military guys: Dan Sherman, Lynn Buchanan, Clifford Stone, Dan Sherman. And we were just talking about how all of them were chosen to do the things they did because they had psi ability, and they worked on that. But the military chose them to be in these programs because they were able to access that higher vibrational whatever they needed to communicate, so to speak. That was a fascinating thing for us.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I
expand
think what
on
was
that.
most fascinating about it is, none of them kind of knew that they were predestined to do this. They all kind of learned during their life journey as they got older. But apparently, all 3 of them had been kind of selected at a very early age and identified to go through this process, especially Clifford and Dan in particular. But as you uncover, one of the most fascinating things about working with people like that is that their humbleness. There's this why me attitude. They're not out to, they're not guns a-blazing type of people. Very, very humble. Very, very humble.
Yeah. Good men, really good men.
So when you say
Clifford was just,
chosen, then they would
yeah,
have been experiencers themselves then before getting into their career path, do you think?
quite possibly. And one thing we did learn in the second film,
Yeah.
more than any of them, is that there's it's a generational thing. It tends to be, and some of it is
Yes.
military. So
Oh, yeah.
it's military families, and it's all of a sudden we learn, oh, my mom and dad were abducted. They were both in the military. Like, what? Oh yeah, my grandfather had an experience, and he was in the military. And like, that's not a coincidence.
So is it safe to say though, because we know that there's a lot of um MILAB, like government interference or military interference with contactees, probably because of the fact that they want to know. Like if you're a contactee, they want to know what you experienced. They want to know everything about what you experienced. So, do you think some of these military families are getting a bit of both?
What? Say that again. So, what would the military families?
Heather.
I'm not quite sure what you asked. I'm sorry.
No, well, a lot of contactees from who have military families or backgrounds. I think we have a bit of a time thing there. They also end up becoming MILAB military abductees as well. And I'm wondering in this case if they were experiencing both,
Yeah, and
like the guys you interviewed.
that really confused us
Okay.
because you're looking at one thing, and then people are telling you now in the military and some of these military people that it was my lab. And then I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, it was actually the government that was abducting me.
Right.
But then a lot of them would talk about how they saw men in uniform and ETs looking over them.
Right.
So when I think about that, logic says that the government is involved in some of these programs, working with certain ET races.
Right.
So
right.
if you have a mantis creature or a reptilian or whoever it is doing stuff on you with the little grays as well doing their stuff, and then in the background you see 2 guys in military uniform, watching,
Mhm.
well,
Right.
it's
It's a bit unsettling.
self-explanatory.
Yeah, it's
But
a bit unsettling.
it's unsettling because, again, it's like, what are we to our government? What are we? Are we just peons? Are we just pieces on a chessboard, on a
Mm.
checkerboard? Are
Yes.
we just the dumb masses and they're
Yeah.
elitists, right? And so if they're elitists, they're like, we're better. We're the ones. We're going to run everything. We're going to
It's on a
control
need to
everything.
know basis. We apparently don't
Right.
need to know.
We don't need
Seriously.
to know. And that's
Right.
what insults, like you mentioned earlier, that's what insults our intelligence. That's why
Mm.
I'm like, John, we need to make these films, like, and again, the whole goal is to just get the information out there so people can have the information, then do their own research. And then the more and more people, there's that when you reach that certain paradigm of, where all of a sudden more people are now believing than not believing,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And and that critical mass, and then all of a sudden we don't know if things will change. Well, we don't know what kind of a grip they have. But when you talk, that's why it was interesting in the third film talking to people like Nick Pope and Salo, because they talked about that, and they talked about, why is the language changing? And it was cool for me. John was blown away by that. John was like, whoa, like that was so cool what Nick Pope said. And then we realized after looking back, right, John, like, was like, that was really, really important what he just said.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Well, I think when we were talking with Nick, what was so enlightening was the fact that he kind of turned the conversation away from the kind of the ufology side of it and more toward the language, how things were being performed by the government and presented by the government. And he said it wasn't just in the UK. He says because you have to pay attention to the words that they are using and then also the words that they're not using. And he was even saying is how, the whole idea of changing from UFO to UAP, because UFO has some negative connotations to it. And then his explanation was to change to UAP was to make it more kind of like scientific in today. And then it would
Right.
make it easier to kind of do this disclosure, soft disclosure, using UAP as kind of the designation, because UFO has such a negative connotation in the media over the last 50, 60 years.
Well, I especially like how when he makes a point of saying flying saucer, which completely discredits it.
Right.
Right.
And he was and that's what he did. That was his job when he was in that role, was to discredit through using language that was, I think, demeaning to a certain extent. And he admitted that. I mean, we had a great conversation with him. We spoke with him for a couple of hours and asked a lot of questions. He even said after the interview, he goes, I've never had an interview like this before where you were asked the questions that you asked. He goes, that was great. I really enjoyed the opportunity to have that level of a discussion about this subject matter. It was great. It was
Right.
gold for us.
Oh, I guess. Well, it's always nice to have your mind, bent a little bit and kind of be, I think that there's a lot in government that we're never going to know. I mean, there are different countries around the world that disclose long before the United States. I think they're pretty much the last, and they're really, they're going kicking and screaming with trying to disclose, which tells me there's a lot that that they are not wanting to make us privy about. I always go back to the Jackie Gleason story,
Right.
Great
right?
story. Yeah.
It
Would have
is.
loved to have validated that, like actually talked to Jackie Gleason before he passed. Or that's such a great story, but like I feel
Yes.
like, oh, we'll never really know, like,
I
because I want to
know.
know.
I
Like
know.
that's one of the things I would love to know for a fact, yes or no.
Yeah,
But
because here you have this big guy who's this well-known, like it was like the celebrity of his time, and he basically just cried
yeah,
because of humanity and everything we don't know and things that are going on. So how much more did he know that he wasn't saying?
right. And one of the things we learned through all three films, but certainly the last film, is that this idea that when you think about the government cover up of UFOs, ETs, UAVs, whatever you want to call them, you have to consider a couple things and just to be objective about it. So in 1947 or whenever it was, there was a decision made to cover it up.
Right.
And it could have happened right in the middle of Roswell, because at the beginning of Roswell, they were saying, oh, yeah, it's a crashed UFO. And then, boom, the military decided they were going to make it a weather balloon. So this was in the actual papers. They changed everything. Whoops, it was a weather thingy. You know, it was a balloon with whatever. And with these mannequins. So it was ridiculous. Like, right, it was the most absurd thing. So, but at that point, very powerful people decided, again, whether for national, it was probably national security and the fact they didn't think we can handle it. Some of these elitist attitudes, they made that decision. So once that happens, and then in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, when you're basically crucifying anyone who says they see a UFO, you're calling it swamp gas, mass hallucinations, things we talked about earlier, right? Like the most ridiculous explanations. And you're dumbing down your entire citizenry, and you're threatening people, and most likely have disappeared some people and done some very horrible things to people. Now they're in a corner, right? So now they paint themselves into this corner where even if they want to disclose and just get it off their chest, they can't, because then they have to explain what's happened the last 70 years. And that's not going to be easy. Someone needs to be held accountable for this.
Exactly.
You know, and they could probably say, well, it was the 1940s guys. They're all dead.
Right.
Or then, that wasn't our, there was nothing we could do. Or they could stand behind national security and say, listen, this was for your own good. Because if you really knew what was going on, and it really was reptilians trying to take over the planet, I don't blame them so much.
Right.
From the standpoint of how the masses will react to that. So I tend to be anti-government. I'm that guy, just because I don't trust them as far as I can throw them.
Right.
And that is everything I've learned in life is to not trust them. But at the same time, if this is so mind-blowing and so dangerous, then maybe there's nothing they can do. Or maybe they're not the ones making the decisions.
Well, then it brings me to this question by Kathy. Why don't the ETs tell or ask the government to disclose everything? Logical.
Yeah, John, you have to understand, John and I would make these things, but like we have 4-hour conversations about this stuff. And those are the things we talk about. I'm like, what are the ETs? What are they waiting for? Are they just like, we need to, is it Star Trek, the prime directive, where it's like, we got to stay out of this?
Okay. So as per your jam session about it, what's both your takes on it?
Yeah, John, you answer first.
Well, I think there's, when you go back to when this all started back in the Roswell, and even prior to that in Mount Rainier, the fear was they didn't know who this was initially. So there was national security issues. Is this Russia? What does Russia have? Is this Germany? Who has the upper hand here?
Yes.
There was concern about that. And I think even to this day, there's a little bit of that. And even some of the development of technology, military technology, is, well, it's under wraps, and therefore we don't want to let you know about it, which is becoming more and more the explanation of sightings today, is that, well, it's, something that we've been developing. I saw an article not too long ago that Australia and the US now have this underwater drone, this technology that obviously has been in development for a long time. Therefore, there probably was some sightings of this technology, and people didn't know what it was, and therefore thought it was something out of this world. So I think there's some explanation that can be with some of this, but the big unknown, to me, is that when you have people who are either in the military or airline pilots or people of professional services who see these things and witness these things, and they come out and say they don't know what it is, that the government can come out and, like they did earlier this year or late last year, and say, oh yeah, it's all nonsense. So you're insulting our intelligence when it comes to something like that. So I think the big unknown in the way that we've kind of presented this is that, there's so much information out there. You have to go and find the information that either speaks to you, resonates with you, stirs you up, and then you have to go on the journey of self-discovery and find out for yourself what resonates with you. And then you kind of take a tack. with us, we didn't want to go out and prove anything. We didn't say, let's take this and go on this journey to prove this yes or no. It was more a matter of, this information's out there, therefore let's present it in a way that is engaging, entertaining to a certain extent, and enlightening, and let people then go on their own journeys. You cannot cover this subject in a 90-minute, hour and 45-minute documentary.
You
We
did
did 3,
great, though.
just scratched the surface.
Yeah, we did
Just
3,
scratched the surface.
but scratch the surface, because then there's so many more questions. I agree. I agree with John. I think that it's, if we tend to look at things very black and white, and as individuals, we get very insulted when people try to insult our intelligence, or if we feel that they're insulting our intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're free thinkers and we're critical thinkers, we really get upset about that. So that's what all these people, that's what we do, right? So but there's shades of gray. Like, I've really thought hard about it, and I said, do I want to know? I do, because it's my curiosity, but do I want to know that the reptilians are trying to take over this planet? That would probably not make me feel good. I would lose a lot of sleep over that. And here's part of the problem. I think the government can't control. They're not in control. They're in control of what they're in control of. And I think that they made agreements, whether it was 19 Eisenhower or before or whenever, with some of these races, ET races, and it was the Cold War, and humans, it's like, okay, we got to know more than the Russians. And so if you give us technology so we can win the Cold War, you can take a percentage of our population and do experiments on them, including cows. Think about it. It's cattle mutilations, and these whether hybridization experiments and using bovine DNA to help with help along these experiments.
A lot of people believe that it's military with the cows.
The only thing I would say there is, and I've talked to people about this, is that why would the military could just ship in 1 billion cows and do experiments on them? Why do they have to do that? Why would they have to act like it's just
random?
There's these military bases that there's not a human being within 1,000 miles of. Just ship in 1 million cattle. There's more than enough cattle to go around, and do the experiments on the cattle. Like, why would they?
Yeah, I guess you just have to think Skinwalker Ranch for that. I mean,
well, and that's why I think it's more than that with the cattle, because first of all, the technology used, and the fact that a lot of them are said, well, it was basically dropped, and so it's dropped, and they could tell it was dropped from 50 feet or 80 feet. And so they know it's crushed, and there's an indentation in the ground. So that whatever happened to them happened, and then it was just dropped back down.
Right.
That wasn't placed down nicely. So to me, and again, listen, Michelle, that's the thing. We have to ask all these questions. Like what if it's how involved is the military, right? But what winds up happening, and this is part of human nature, is it becomes so convoluted, because everyone who does the research and has their own theory of it, and then all of a sudden the ego comes in. So I think that David Jacobs is a hero. I do. I think he's a courageous man who's done incredible research. But I've seen some of the comments here, and it's like, well, he's not, he's just thinking because he's done this and this is his legacy.
Yeah, well, I think my curiosity is he's like, his PhD in history is what led him to want to do this specifically, because it is outside the box for him.
It is, and I think part of it was when he met John Mack, because he got to know those guys, and then when he met Dr. Mack, he got him into this, and then so he was like, "Well, this is interesting, right, John? Isn't that what happened? He was a John Mack guy."
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, and also Bud. He also learned from Bud too the techniques. So he kind of picked up the torch from that and kind of went with. And in situation and having those conversations with him too, you kind of get the impression that this wasn't his life mission to do this. It's almost kind of like he was, selected. Not selected in the sense that somebody from above did it, but it just was like he was pointed in a direction in his life, and once he started to go down it, he had to be true to himself and continue the work that he had started. So very unique. He's a brilliant man. We had the pleasure and luxury of spending time with him,
Right.
and numerous phone calls, and then in the interview that we did with him. And he's convinced. And what was great about the little things that happen when you're filming a documentary. So we filmed that segment with him in his home outside of Philadelphia. And when we were done with the interview, because during the course of conversation, he talked about that he has copies of all the video or the audio tapes that he has done. And he took us upstairs to he doesn't have one study, he has like two. And they're massive, and they're filled with books, and I mean, just massive, 2 rooms filled with all of this archival information that he's documented over the years. And he takes us to this closet and opens the door, and there's just this boxes upon boxes of audio cassettes, the micro audio cassettes of what he's done. And he said, I've got everything, it's all right here. He said that my work is, and he said, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. He says, I'm reaching the end of my time, and I don't know what I'm going to do with all this information. So I hope at some point that information is available for other researchers to evaluate, because it's
and he was, wasn't he also wanted? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think wasn't he also? I think he said this. He was saying, like, do you think that I would be as cranky and grumpy as I am if I didn't know this? Like, I don't want to know this.
Right.
I'd be a much happier, less grumpy person.
Right.
If I didn't know this.
And I think that's one of the themes that we've seen through most of the interviews that we've done, both with people who have been abducted or have touched abductees in some way, shape, or form, that they never would have chosen this. If someone had told them when they were in their formative career years that this would be their life journey for the next 30 years, would they choose it? They would say absolutely not. They wouldn't want it. They wouldn't want it as an abductee. They wouldn't want it as a historian. We've talked with several different people who have spent their lives documenting and basically for the public record, and said, I make no money doing this. And I think that's a misconception by so many people who are quick to say, oh, those UFO people are nuts and all they want is out to make a buck. Nobody makes money. Nobody makes money doing
but
this.
it's not really about that either, right? It's not really about that either.
That's the quick, I think, reflex action for a lot of people, is that they're in it for the money, and it just is not true.
Right. No, I mean, from an experience or contactee standpoint, we were talking about that before you come on, how David says, well, people come in with knowing that there's some kind of a job. Like, I know what my job is already. And when he came out with, most of everybody says it's crowd control. I'm like, I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
I really did not see that coming. So why crowd control? Why is this the most popular, in his opinion, from all the people that he has spoken to? Why crowd control? Because we all want to think we're doing something glorious for the planet and mankind. Why crowd control?
Well, I think the one thing about that's most fascinating is the fact that, like you said, why that? Why would that be the thing that becomes a common thread through multiple interviews?
Right.
Talk about out of left field concepts. You would, like you said, you would think it would be something more important or something that was more specific to technology or advanced DNA or anything that medical science is, but it's ushering people in an evacuation of the planet or moving them off planet through what? That's just crazy. But if that's the thread, I think that's what he was saying, is that if you keep hearing the same things over and over, you have to give some credence to it.
So let me ask you this. He's making an assumption that maybe, they are integrating into our society, talking about hybrids, and we'll get to that in a moment. But why are we assuming that it is a takeover? What about cataclysm? And maybe they're actually coming to help, and humans will trust, on an average, other humans. So if they see there's a craft there, they're going to trust, like an everyday human, saying, okay, look, like, stuff's going down. We've got to get on this craft. I've been on it. You're safe. It's okay. Because, I mean, they're going to go kicking and screaming, some of these people, especially people of faith. They'd be like, hell to the no on that.
Right.
Right.
I don't
And
see
that,
it as
but that,
being orderly.
no, but that's part of the ascension now we're getting. So that's, again, is it for negative purposes where these hybrids are going to take control of the planet and we're going to become slaves, or we're going to be just eliminated? Or is it that these hybrids are going to help us either get off planet
Mhm.
because there's something cataclysmic's going to happen, or just help us to take that next step in our evolution, which I tend to believe,
Right.
because I just, and I'm not, but I also do believe there are some who are trying to do very nefarious things. But I think
Right.
for the most part, these evolved, I say spiritually evolved, not just technologically evolved,
Mhm.
ETs understand. They got past that part of themselves
Right.
to be able to become that advanced, and they're higher vibrational, not lower vibrational. So
Right.
we're dealing with higher and lower, and we're dealing with a lot of different life forms, I think. And it's just, we have to come to terms. And I don't think, again, I think you're right. I think 5,000 years ago, or even 40,000 years ago, we were way more open to that, and we may have felt it more because our intuition, again, we were closer to that. We
Mhm.
weren't so
Mhm.
distracted. And I
Right.
think that's the problem today, where people don't know. They're so big. I know so many people, and now that's part. John and I talk about this too. It's like, I think I'd be a happier person not knowing a lot of what I know,
Really?
because there is something to be said for ignorance is bliss. I know so many people and family members and friends.
Yeah.
They just go about life, and it's I don't know what motivates them. It's usually about materialistic things.
Sure.
It's how
Well,
much money I can
distraction.
make. How do I keep up with the
Right.
Joneses? How do I keep up with the
Right.
Kardashians? How do I keep
Right.
up with Hollywood movie stars?
But that's
And
all distractions.
all distractions.
It's
Well,
easier to be distracted.
yeah, one thing I want to interject into this too is that I've been fortunate for the last 6 years. My wife and I have been doing the digital nomad thing, and I've had a chance to travel around the world and experience different cultures, and have a chance to spend not just a couple of days or weeks at a place, but extended period of time, usually a month at a minimum, up to 3-6 months in some places. And most of the indigenous people in areas that are less developed and less culturally influenced still have a strong connection to their cultural roots. And
Yes.
they almost to every single place that we've been to in Central South America and in Southeast Asia, where there's this historical culture that's still vibrant and lives today, they still believe in the sky people. Almost every place that we've gone to, I've asked that question, and every single person that is a native of a specific culture has said, oh yeah, there's no hesitation, none.
Right. Right.
Whether it may not be documented, but it is part of their spoken, the oral history that
Oral
has been
history.
passed for generations and generation. And
Right.
they don't even hesitate. They don't look at me funny. They're just kind of like,
Right.
yeah, it's
Right.
accept, and had long conversations with a couple of people about their experiences as a result of that.
That gave me the
See,
chills. That was
I
so
know, but I
cool.
love that because
Yeah, I love it.
this is what the ancient people were about. There was no fear up
Right.
No,
until
and they still
freaking
don't. They
Roswell,
don't. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I know. Like it's totally. You
And
can
what does
go
it
to.
say about us as a culture that I think we're so messed up?
Yeah,
Thank
we're
I
on
hate to
the
say
we're
it.
on
I
the
know viewers
treadmill.
go, "Oh, we're America."
That's a whole other
It's like,
show.
yeah, but
We
it's
go
like
on just about that.
it's so sad, isn't it?
It is.
How sad is that?
Yeah.
It's very sad because it's not hard to reconnect. And when you talk about hybrids, and everybody thinks hybrids are, some like dangerous. I guess it depends on who you've been hybridized with, because you look at a hybrid and you may not even
Right.
know you're looking at a hybrid. How do you know you're not looking at a hybrid right now?
Right.
Right.
That's the conversation that we have all the time, because
Right?
the thing that really motivated me from the very beginning of this was that. And John, I know we're not going to
I
talk
already know
about
what
the
you're going to
first
say.
film, but yeah, because to me the message was this. After we did the first film, that was it to me. It was like, who are these hybrid kids? Like that's what we need to talk about here. What's going
Right.
on here?
Right.
This is way beyond the shiny metal object in the sky at this point. Who are these kids?
Right.
And then I saw one. Oh, that's a different story. I think I may have already told you, Michelle. I'm not sure.
Oh, when we
But
talked about the seating, yeah, possibly. But tell it
yeah.
again for anybody who's
Well,
listening.
no, that was it was at the airport. I don't want to repeat myself, but John and I were like, listen. And while we were doing the first and second film, like, all this weird stuff was happening to us. And then there's no question I saw one. And again, I thought that I would be somehow. I still think there's going to come a day, and John and I have talked about doing a short film about this. The moment of that contact with a hybrid, where we get a tip from someone in the Nevada desert, right? And they're like, she's here now. It's a real hybrid. Get over here. And then it's just the anticipation of being face to face with a hybrid child and talking to them.
Right.
That, to me, you want to talk about bucket list.
Right.
That gives bucket list a new meaning. That's like,
yeah. How many women who have been part of these hybridization programs can, I mean, I'm sure there's listeners out there raising their hand saying, I've seen my hybrid child. I've seen my
Oh, I can
children.
connect you with
I've
at
been
least,
in that
at least
situation
one.
where I was face to face with them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can connect you with at least one easily.
Yeah.
Easily. I mean,
And
when you talk about in the film about how hybrids are taught how to drive craft or they all have different roles. I can introduce you to one. No problem.
Yeah. And
I know people from all walks of life. Right.
And you're right, though. The hybrid I saw, you knew was a hybrid right away.
Right.
Because of the shape of her face, her eyes were so,
Okay.
She stood out.
Right. Right.
As if you were a medical doctor, you would say she has a condition.
Right.
Not sure what the condition is.
Right.
But there's something going on with her.
Right.
And that's going back to really, I think, the half human, half either gray or whatever they're mixing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It really depends on what they've been hybridized from.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because some look like you and me.
Yeah. And which begs the question, what's the hybrid soup there? What's the recipe on that one?
Right.
Because reptilians are too unlike us to if a hybrid reptilian, you would know right away.
Well, so there are some hybrid reptilians who, you share the blood type, but, their eyes might slit. They may do crazy things like that. It may be nothing more than that.
I've seen that too, by the way.
Oh.
Also at an airport.
No, I told
John
stories.
that. Yeah, I mean, I flipped out.
Stories.
He was a regular looking guy.
Yeah.
And he was dressed like very preppy.
Yeah.
And we had just gotten back to Orlando from New Mexico. Right. And I looked at this guy and I saw his eyes change and become like reptilian for a second. Yeah. And it scared the hell out of me.
Or they go dark, really dark or red or things like that.
And I'm like, what in the world just happened? And because of what we were working on at the time, I knew I was probably more exposed, and I had, again, because of what I was doing,
it, for sure.
I was
but maybe followed.
Or that too, because we definitely got the phone calls to suggest that we were being monitored. So yeah.
Well, that's a risk I think you take, because I'm actually not surprised to hear you say that, because you guys are interviewing people up close and personal. You are being made privy to personal information that nobody else would be made privy to. Let's face it, nobody is just going to go out there and just say, oh yeah, hey, like David Jacobs has all of this information and you guys are interviewing him. You're being made privy to recordings, information. You're interviewing other people who have, like in the seating, they're telling you, no, this happened to me. These people aren't going to just walk up to military government and say, hey, by the way, nobody's going to do that. No. You guys are the go-between,
Right.
And they want
and we've approached it from a way that it's not about ego for us. This is not about our story in any way. And one of the things I'm most proud of with our films is that when people talk about them, they don't talk about us. Talk about the subject matter. We're not front and center. Or there are people out there who are putting themselves into the story because it's part of their brand, and that's okay. That's their thing,
Right.
and whatever works for them works for them. But
Right.
we've always approached it from let's let the people who've had the experiences be the ones who share their stories, not someone's perspective of what has happened to somebody.
Right.
And let the stories speak for themselves, because if you talk to enough people, it doesn't matter who you talk to, whether they're people who've had experiences or people who've had connections to government experiences or people who feel like they've been or come to the conclusion much later in life that they had been abducted and numerous times and have children. So you're going through this gamut of all these different people, and we now have a population that more than 50% of the population believes in this subject matter. And I think primarily because the narrative is this continuous flow of information. Sure, all the footage of the shiny metal objects in the sky are blurry, and it's, the complaint is with modern technology and these handheld cameras that are so good, why do we still get shitty, blurry
Right.
stuff? So
Right.
I get
Right.
that, but what we've been, you mentioned the privilege side of it for us is that we've built a reputation as being concerned citizens, and that we care about the people that we speak to, and that we protect them as much as we possibly can, and we create an environment for them to feel comfortable enough to tell their story. And as a result of that, we've got some things that we really didn't expect to get,
Right.
to be honest with you. And it's been an honor to be in a position where we've created that environment that they feel comfortable enough to share to a certain level of their stories, both on the government, from the Dan Sherman, we were surprised that he shared as much as he did with us. Really surprised. There was things that he specifically said, I can't.
Even after all these years, there's still,
Yeah,
they don't tell
there's things
us
he can't talk
like,
about. Yeah, absolutely. We got that impression. I can't, when we were interviewing Dan, he's like, well, I know what I can talk about, because if I talk about this, then I'll be in trouble. So I can't
Right.
talk about these things.
Right.
But I can talk about, my experiences.
The greatest thing we can do as filmmakers is share and say, ladies and gentlemen, Clifford Stone, and let people listen to yours. Clifford Stone.
Yeah.
The floor is yours, Clifford, because people need to hear him. People need to experience.
I would love to bring him on to share
that interview. Well, he's passed.
I could give him a
that's
forum.
that's
he's passed. Well,
Clifford's passed.
I can say.
We have a friend, Heather Besser, who, by the way, Heather's a
shout
out.
Heather's going to be on the show next week.
Oh, awesome. Oh my God. I'm going to have to come on and make comments, but she's on. I know she made a comment. So hi, Heather.
She did, especially this one.
So that's awesome. But she's the best. And but again, it's, she probably could talk to him. Without question. And that's actually something that's, but anyway, that's a different show. But you can't listen to Clifford and come away the same person. You can't listen to him and not be affected by it in a I say a positive way.
Right.
Because you're looking at an honorable man, at as Jon said, a humble man, as an honest man, and a man who has gone through hell and back because he was a puppet of the U.S. military.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear his story, and you hear it coming from him, and you see his face, and you see his emotions, you almost, I defy anyone to come out of that and say, all of this is nonsense.
Right.
I challenge.
And that's that's another, again, the privilege that we have too, that we wish it was possible to explain to people. We spent hours, if not days, with some of the people that we've interviewed. So you in a film, you're seeing snippets. You're seeing maybe, for the person who gets a lot of airtime, 15 minutes of their story, where we have spent, like I said, hours and days, and we take the information that is shared and whittle it down into a compelling story that is the most salient and the most powerful of their story. But when you're spending time with them, and in between the moments of the camera rolling, and you're just sitting there having a conversation, and they're sharing the realities with you in a way that you can't help but be moved, because you see the level of impact that this experience or multiple experiences has had on their lives. And it really is an honor to be in that situation. I think we feel very, very privileged that we've had the opportunity to spend hours with people, knowing that we could never give their story the amount of time that
Justice.
it deserves.
Right.
All of these people. And by the way, Claudette, it's Clifford Stone. And he has a book you can get, and it's all about the crash retrieval. So, but I have to say, we cherish everyone we've ever spoken to,
Right.
because they were so, I can't even say.
It's
like,
humbling
just,
when somebody entrusts themselves and their stories, their experiences to you. It says a lot, because it's difficult for some people to tell those stories.
yes.
You know,
And I think that part of it for us, thank goodness, and this is what we're all about, is that our reputation is that we're going to honor their story.
right.
If we talk to you and we do a documentary and you're one of the people we talk to, we are not going to make you look foolish. We're not. We won't do that.
Right.
We are going to honor your story, and we're not going to give our own opinions. And this is your story. And everyone who's been in one of our movies has been like, thank you.
Right.
I appreciate that. It was perfect. Thank you. And that's what we want to be as filmmakers, because, and then too, this way we do our next one and our next one. That's why we're able to get all these people.
Right.
Because the rumor, the news spreads, right? And it's like, hey, these guys are good. These guys aren't full of it. These guys know what they're doing. They're professional filmmakers. They care about the craft.
Right.
Not ET craft, the craft of filmmaking.
I don't know. I'd be all about that. Like when you say life is bliss to know nothing, I want to know everything. Sure, I'm a freaking ridiculous, but I want to know everything. I'm a nut.
No, I'm totally with you on that.
I research so much. I'm versed because I want to know. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I was going to say too that, with so many of the people that we have worked with, and a lot of people were gun shy, that we had to spend time with them before we were able to get them comfortable with especially the experiencers.
Right.
They said, oh, I've told my story before, but it's been skewed. I've been crucified in some way. I didn't know how it was going to ultimately be used. And that we took that very serious, to say is that that will not happen with us. This is about you. This is not about my agenda. This is not about our agenda. This is not a narrative that we're trying to push. At all.
And we're not TV, where TV is, ridiculous. They make everyone look bad because they're trying to, do whatever they're trying to do.
Well, I was just scanning through the notes here, and I see that Dolly had a comment about Dr. Jacobs, and he learned his craft of hypnotism from Bud Hopkins. So he trained with Bud Hopkins.
Right.
And did he have all the PhDs behind his name? No, but he had a passion. I have spent time with him, hours and hours of time with him, and I would say he has no agenda. His agenda may have been to sell books, because he had stumbled into something that he had never expected to be a part of his life. So once he had the opportunity to tell the story, I think maybe there was a desire to continue to tell the story. But as I said earlier, these people don't make a lot of money. This is not about an agenda for money. They don't make money. They don't get fame. They get ridiculed. Why would you choose a life of ridicule unless you were chosen, tapped on the shoulder to be, the person who's to guide and shepherd the story?
Which is something he says. He goes, I'm hoping I'm not the last one.
Right.
I'm hoping somebody else takes the torch, takes it from me moving forward. So maybe it's about the information at some point. There are people out there who care about the research and who care about people.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I agree. And I hope that there's less, there's more of that and less of my personal brand. And there's a lot of the personal brand is just as important as the story. Again, I get that, but it doesn't necessarily serve the underlying story, which is let the story speak for itself. Give the people a platform and let them speak about it, and present it in a way that, encourages people to do their own research and come to their own conclusions. That was our goal from the very beginning. Is, what if this is all real? Just
Right.
ask that question, pose that to yourself, and then how does it look? How does the world look if it is true?
Well, so then I have to ask you this: are you guys experiencers? Who wants to go first?
Ooh,
Haha. Dun, dun, dun.
I would
Right.
say yes. Yes, definitely from a paranormal standpoint.
Okay, but what about from ET?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because they do go hand in hand. There's a lot of similarities,
I don't think I'm an abductee. I would have had memory of that. I really
contactee
feel
then.
like
Yeah, experiencer.
I feel like I've been shown some things.
Mhm.
Nothing bad, good. And I feel like we've been communicated to. I really do feel that.
Mhm.
And I feel like they knew we were working on these docs. And there might have been some that didn't want these to come out, but there were certainly some others who definitely wanted these to come out.
Hmm.
And I think that there were interventions. And so from that standpoint, yes, absolutely.
Okay. John, how about you?
Yeah, I would say contacted, especially when we were working on our first film, the
Right.
level of engagement that we had, that we couldn't really explain how we were being communicated with, how technically it was working,
Mhm.
and had that all kind of verified through people in the phone company that said it would be impossible to do what they were doing unless it was through somebody in the government. So it's not something that could happen at the switching office level. So
Right.
we knew that there was something going on. Was it ET? Was it government? Was it white
Both.
knights, black knights? All of
All
the
of the
above, most
above.
likely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
all of
most
the above.
likely.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I can't say that I have had anything that, I've seen lights in the sky, definitely on multiple occasions. So that I have definitely seen
You've seen a
UFOs.
daylight disc. Come on.
Yeah, I've seen
The
a
one
few
thing I've
things.
always wanted to
there-
see is a daylight disc. This guy, when he was a kid, saw 2 of them. I didn't know that.
Well, you know what? We had somebody on the show, I can connect you with, who guarantees you will have an experience if you want to go to Sedona.
Yeah.
And he does
Mhm.
the UFO tours out there, John Polk. And he claims, he goes, I will guarantee you an experience.
Because is that because of the night watches, and is that because like they're seeing things that obviously are maneuvering and not Starlink?
Yeah, I've seen that. Definitely seen
Yeah.
that.
Oh no. Yeah. No. He apparently, they know where the satellites are because he can track
Yeah,
those, and he's
absolutely.
got like $4,000 or $5,000 night vision goggles, like military grade, and he goes all out to do it. But I'm kind of like, a guarantee is pretty strong. He goes, I've never had to refund anybody.
Whoa,
No.
So it's like,
that's
ooh.
impressive.
I know. So I don't know. Maybe you'll get your experience.
Listen, honestly, I actually saw one craft,
Right.
and that was a triangular shape. Actually at a UFO conference in Sebring, Florida. So that was the coolest thing. And the people I was around, there was no coincidence there either.
Right.
And obviously the UFO conference, but it was definitely a triangular shaped craft,
And
stealth,
some people believe those are all military.
and that could have been.
Yeah.
I tend to think they're
High tech, though.
military.
Pretty cool.
I feel like they're military, but they're back engineered. How do they get
Yes.
that? Like where are
Yes.
they getting that technology, and how long have they been around? But if they are
Absolutely.
military craft, again,
Yes.
it's still
They're
fascinating.
still
But
pretty phenomenal when you think
yeah,
about it. Like
pretty
it,
phenomenal. Absolutely.
absolutely.
And it literally flew right over a UFO conference.
Oh, I know. I can't get better than that, though.
So it's like, what are they monitoring? What are they hiding or trying to hide?
Not trying to hide. We're here. Here we go.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Everybody
Listen,
look up. Right.
when
So
I know a guy who saw a fleet of triangular shaped craft during the day, and this was Florida. It was in Tampa. Him and his wife, and I was like, no way. Like, I think seeing things like that in the day is mind blowing. I've never seen anything in the day.
Oh, I could send you pictures of stuff taken in the day.
Really?
I've never, yeah, I've seen crazy things in the day. Oh my God. I had a friend of mine sent me a text, and she goes, okay, she says, something's coming your way. should reach you at about, because she saw it. She was in a high-rise apartment and she saw it going over Lake Ontario. And she goes, should reach you in about 15, 20 minutes. I was like, I'll bite. Like I'm whatever, throw caution to the wind, jump in with both feet. I'll bite. Let's go see what this is. And all of a sudden, this huge cloud came up, and I'm going, all right, please tell me you're not talking about a stupid cloud. She goes, watch the back of it. This thing went over the river, and from the back, you just saw this round, dark, metallic, and the cloud was just like with light. And I'm
Wow.
like, well, shit, I have no explanation for that. So, and this was like 2:00 in the afternoon. Like, I'm thinking, if you're trying to hide, you're just failing miserably at it. But, I do think that there are experiences happening everywhere, and people are capturing it with their phones, you can't hide it anymore. And yet, disclosures, like I said, it's like kicking and screaming. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. It's like, well, we're all ahead of you while you're trying to, make this big deal about, those little TikTok videos, or, it's just like, meanwhile, people are getting like phenomenal pictures of things.
Well, I think that's really the military and the government's
Yes.
slow drip for disclosure. It's
Yeah.
it's going to make it a little bit easier for them to walk back all of the nonsense that they've shared for the last 60 years.
Right.
Yeah, we
If
talked
they can
about
do
this
that.
before you came on, John. I was saying, well, how are they going to back 70 years of the nonsense
It's
they
true.
Yeah.
built? They're in a corner. It's going to be hard for them.
Well, if there's any truth to, the stories of alleged agreements where presidents have said, sure, take our people, somebody has to be held accountable for that, because
Mhm.
people have been abducted, whether by military or whether by, extraterrestrial beings or races. And some people have been, just kind of snapped because of it. It's horrific experiences for a lot of people.
Sure.
So, can you imagine the lawsuits if that was proven to be true? Can you imagine the mass hysteria? Like, I'm sorry, you just don't want to think that your government is selling you and just throwing you under the bus for technology.
Mhm.
At the end of the
Well,
day,
it just the war machine is much more of a priority to the military, especially to the military, more so than the government, because the
Right.
machine is the machine. You got to keep feeding the machine.
right, exactly.
And it's unfortunate that we're like Jack said earlier, we're the pawns on the chessboard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
pretty
again,
much,
when you think
yeah.
about the modern era of UFO sightings, it starts right after we dropped the bomb, 1945.
Okay,
Before
let's
World War
talk
II.
about the bomb. Okay, can you imagine, dimensionally speaking, the ripple effect that would have going across? Let's face it, we're we have dimensions. If we're in the same time or same space but different times, and something like that happens in one space, it's going to ripple
Right.
through. They're going to peeve a few people off.
Well, and the ETs were all over it. And when you think about it,
Yes.
so that happens, and then boom, right? Daylight discs all over the place after that.
Oh,
Mount
man.
Rainier, Roswell crashes,
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
And then again, people have to remember is they were also over nuclear missile sites, making sure that those missiles never went off.
Right.
And that's, that there's
Oh,
many
yeah.
a book written
Disarming
about that. Right. So they're definitely making sure we don't do that. And that's why people really worried about nuclear war. So I'm not, because the ETs will never let it happen. But that is, you have to think about it as that, like, what effects is it having on a cosmic level?
Oh,
And they became all of a sudden incredibly interested in everything we were doing.
But those are the ones that are off planet. What about the ones that are in the oceans? What about the ones that have been here before us, who are subterranean or who live in the mountains? Or there are so many stories and eyewitness accounts of encounters with beings who are here and have been here long before us. We're the kids who just can't play well in the sandbox. It's that simple.
We can't, and again, we don't have that.
We're not as evolved. We're not as evolved.
Not nearly as evolved. but you have underground bases, right? So you have
Yes.
that. You have the
Yes.
cave systems. You have the
Yes.
mountains, like I
Yes.
mean,
Absolutely.
Albuquerque,
There's so much.
the Ponte,
Yes.
there are way stations that have been here for thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
And it's almost like a pit stop, or going on your way to a galactic adventure, and you stopping here for food and
Right.
supplies,
Right.
whatever it might be, whatever you're doing.
Right.
So there's literally a network. If you believe it,
Mhm.
that's the case, then yes, there people talk about that.
Right.
And if that's the case, yeah, how are they? They're the ones that I think control everything, and that's why I think the government is just scrambling. It has been scrambling for a long time.
So do you think they're pawns, or do you think they're willing players?
They're willing players.
Right.
But they're willing players because they
Right.
have to be willing players. Like, I feel like they have to cooperate, and they had to pick and choose who they're going to cooperate with. And if it's all about war, and it's all about beating the Russians, right, in the Cold War, then they're going to trade people and cows for
Right.
technology, and if
So-
it's about and that unfortunate.
Do you think we have a galactic space fleet? Because I know that's pretty exopolitic, but there are fans of that. Do you think we are?
Oh, us?
Yeah. Solar Warden.
I would feel awkward
That's a
speaking
tough
on that, only because I've never gotten into that. Like, that's something we haven't researched.
That's
We haven't
Michael.
interviewed
That's Dr.
anyone.
Michael Sala stuff. Yeah, I know. It
is.
There are books written on it too. There's a lot of people who truly believe it, that there is a space fleet, and then there are those who are just like, no.
Would I be surprised if there was a station on the dark side of the moon? No. Our, like that we were,
right
from the moon going to wherever we were going. So it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Nothing would surprise me, because
No.
unless you're privileged enough to be one of those people who are, coasting along in the cosmos, there is no real way of knowing 100%. So next film, what's it going to be? Oh. Spill it.
Oh, John, that's a tough question. We are okay. So this actually is a good segue, because I don't know the easiest way to explain this, because someone asked earlier where they can see these films. So, very long story, very short, is that we had to change distributors because they breached the contract. Ooh. So everything that we were streaming,
not just with us, but
not just with us,
of people,
everyone that they had content with.
Wow.
And so we had to leave them, get our stuff off of that. And we are already with another distributor, but it's going to take maybe a little bit longer, a couple weeks, for
45 days,
45 or so, give or take, to come up on all the through all the streaming services. So what we would tell people is that be patient, and that you'll know when they're out there. But I don't know how else we would do this. It's kind of a bummer for us, because then we're on the show and people are going to want to know, and it's like,
well, I came across a copy. I posted it everywhere because they could, at least they could see it. And I wanted people to see it, just to be able to interact with you tonight, right?
Yeah, so, and listen, we're just happy now we have a good distributor, and it's going to be on all these platforms again. Right. And because of that, now we're working with this distributor. Of course, they want more content. So we're working with them to come up with a couple of other ideas, of course, in the paranormal realm. We've had some other ideas that aren't as UFO related as they are maybe paranormal ghost related.
I could help. I consult. This is what I do, pro bono. Anything you need. I have filled entire TV seasons with people, and I've done ideas just seem to flow. So whatever you need.
You know what? We talked about this. We also talked about the whole Knights Templar thing. We have so many ideas, and the thing is, we will do another UFO ET related documentary. We just want to do the right one, because we figure we have this trilogy. which is great. And again, they stand on their own, but they're also great as a trilogy. So for us, it's like, where do we go from here? Do we tell of another fascinating story, or do we take it to another level of maybe more esoteric, or where do we go? But we want to make sure whatever we do it right.
If you do that, not only do I have loads of information, I also have a location that is completely untouched.
Ooh.
North America, Knights Templar, Indigenous, everything.
Oh, wow.
Untouched.
Well, that's a conversation.
And full proof. It's all there. It's all being documented.
That would be something we would want to do. Like, because we want it to be as compelling, really good.
No, this would be really good. And yeah.
Let's chat.
I think we should chat because it is well deserving. It is well deserving. When we speak, we can all, we can all have a Zoom, whatever, when we speak, and I can tell you everything, then you'll be like, no way.
Wow. Okay, let's plan on having that conversation. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because we want to share more with people. That's our goal. We really do. We're also working on some just feature-length films,
right?
As opposed to documentaries. We're doing a couple of screenplays that we're working on, and some of them are metaphysically inspired. So we're branching out to do some other things, but we always will come back to the docs because we enjoy it, and we know we could tell a good story. But you just got to have, like, this trilogy was perfect. It was perfect for us, and it kind of just all fell into place one after the other. So now we need to have discussions about what can we do next that's just, again, very compelling, and in the same realm of, UFOs, ETs would be great.
Gosh, guys, you want content. I could get you so much content on so many different things because I know so many incredible, well-researched people who would just put it out there, like, in ways like again, we'll go back to Templar for just a moment. If you want to take it a whole other step, one of our very good friends just happens to own the owner of the whole Tomar Horde, which is a Knights Templar never before seen collection that the world has never seen. It's priceless, and it is there. He owns it all from Portugal, found piece by piece over the course of 10 years.
Wow. And Portugal's definitely yes, that's
yes,
nice.
And even
territory.
The Portugal, right? Yeah, and it's he even has, like, Himmler had a Knights Templar helmet. He's got it.
Oh wow. Yeah, it gets into so many, because the Nazis were all over that. They wanted to know everything they could about that.
Well, think Otto Rahn, because I have two friends who have both written books, well-researched, like 30, 40, 50 years of research on Otto Rahn, who went looking for all of this stuff, all of these, their quest for all of this ancient knowledge that the Nazis were on, Otto Rahn, Himmler, all of those. Gift wrapped.
Oh, wow. All right, let's chat.
We can chat. I could keep you guys going for a very long time, I promise. So. I promise. But it was just a real treat having you both on. John, you're just like the icing on the cake tonight.
No. I mean, thanks for when you first sent that, Jack. I was like, "What are you talking about?"
What do you want me to do with
I
this?
had no idea. No, I didn't even make the initial connection about the podcast. I thought he was talking about. Yeah, I'm out in outer space right now.
Right, and I normally I would never do that, Michelle, but I thought it would be cool. And again, I apologize for overstepping.
No, it's never an overstep.
I got excited, and I know John can add so much. Like, we're talking about it, and he's the director, so, like, here I am praising him. I'm like, hey, John,
I've worked with amazing directors. The director's the brains.
And I knew, what, I wanted you to meet John because I knew you'd like him, and now we can have some more discussions about things. So
and I love it. And I always say, Amelia and I are really stringent about the fact that when guests come on the show, it's your show. You talk about what you want.
We appreciate that. Yeah, we appreciate that.
Pleasure.
You're a great host. I love this show. I really
Thank
do.
you.
Yeah, it's more.
Every
It's a
time I've been on, I've had
conversation.
a blast.
Thank you. But this is what we like
Uh,
it to be like. Round table,
yeah.
just have some fun, just, spew it out there, see what comes out. You get the best information this way, the best stories. It's just off the cuff. It's just not so regulated, right? As you
Right.
could see, it went in all kinds of different directions, but a lot of great stuff came out. So, we definitely would love to do it again with both of you. And then I know we've got Gettysburg, and I know we've got Knights Templar. We've got a lot of stuff that we have coming up. So you guys, can jam about it. I'm happy to connect with both of you at any time, but talk about something that
Great.
you want to do a show together. Open door policy. Just let me know. We want to talk about this. Okay. That's
No, that's
that
awesome.
easy.
But we'll
Right.
definitely follow up with you on your offer to chat offline.
Yes. Well, thank you. And in
Yeah.
the meantime, I mean, like I said, I can make that happen. So let's definitely make it happen. Let me know what your plans are, and I can definitely assist. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
And
You
tell
make it a lot
Amelia
of
to
fun.
feel better. I just so you know, like I sent her the book,
Yes, you
and
said, yeah.
she was so sweet. She sent me these chocolate things that she made, but and I felt bad because she had it from
Oh,
Canada.
she
It had to
got
go through
those.
that same
Yeah.
rigmarole that I had
Yeah.
to send the book. It's like you're sending something to another planet. It's like
Oh,
impossible
it's
to send.
ridiculous. You want to
So,
send
but
anything to Canada? Are you kidding?
one of the things that happened when it got
No.
here, the chocolate had melted a little bit. Oh, it melted. So I
Oh,
put it in the fridge
right.
and got it so that it was
Right.
compact again, hard, and it was
Yes.
delicious. So just so Amelia, everyone knows, Amelia made some really nice. She was a
No,
thank
she
you
didn't
for
make
sending the
them.
book.
She knows
Oh,
it's a friend of her daughter's who owns this amazing chocolate place, and
oh,
they ship worldwide. Like she started off like this, and now it's just a conglomerate. It's just crazy.
it was really sweet of her. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. Amelia's known for sending her chocolate. Everybody loves her. Put me on the list, Amelia. So, it's great. But guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I mean, Jack, I'll email you
Absolute
and
pleasure.
thank you. So get together and let's do it.
Okay, absolutely, and thank you, Michelle, for having us on, and we really
Pleasure.
appreciate you. So
Thank you. Thank you. Just a platform where we can all just share it because it needs to be shared. See, maybe that's my job.
that is,
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's.
well.
I mean, we all have a
Those are
purpose. Yeah,
yeah,
and you're really good at this. So
Uh,
that you have to think about
yeah.
that. Like it's like,
My first thought is where have you been all these years?
yeah, exactly right.
thanks.
No, dude, it's a delightful show to be on, Michelle. Seriously.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you. Well, oddly enough, all these years I've been in front of the camera with paranormal stuff. And then I had this revelation, doing the show when I retired from film, doing the show was sort of like, wait a minute, meeting all of these people, such as yourselves, and hearing all these incredible stories and connecting the dots between paranormal events and, contactee extraterrestrial events, right down to smells, right down to even sleep paralysis. Just crazy
hmm
things that you think about and you go, are they one and the same? And I believe in many cases they are one and the same, and maybe people are not connecting.
Right.
hmm
So, but this is fantastic documentary. I can't say it enough. I've watched it twice. I love it. I love them all. So,
Thank you.
not being biased or
Thank you.
anything, but I really, really did enjoy it. And I know people are going to go out looking for it. And as soon as they're available, they're going to be jumping on them. So, right now, best way to contact you guys
Through the
is your
website.
website's been going across.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, the websites
yeah.
that are going across, they can contact us. They can find everything on there. And again, please just be patient as we're switching distributors, but they will be available, all three films. So just be a little patient, and maybe on our site or so we'll say, hey, they're available. We'll
Yeah,
figure it out.
we need to do an update on our site to let people know that they're currently unavailable, but will be soon.
Okay, fantastic. So, as I close off, thank you to everybody who tuned in tonight, guys in the chat room. You're all outstanding. You just make it that much more fun. And big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring us tonight and every night. Thank you. Thank you. Big thank you to Justin Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, dark wave electronic music. He is responsible for the intro that you guys hear every night. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind all of our banners. Find him on Instagram, find him on Facebook, does great commission pieces. Next week, we welcome back Dan and Teresa Duke, as well as Heather Besser. Woo! Brand new for
there
Outer
you
Realm.
go.
Yeah.
You go,
Woo-hoo.
Heather. Woo.
I know,
And Dan
right?
and Teresa, too. They're awesome. I love
Yeah,
them.
that's going to be
I
great.
know. Oh, we love them. This is, I think, going to be like their fourth time on. They're great. So, but they're going to talk about how Heather assisted them on their journey to do all of this research on their great-great-grandfather, Jesse James. So check it out.
Right.
And Thursday, Matt Rosk returns. Now, he's sort of one of those TikTok sensations. He's been on the show before. The show just went through the roof. He is from Cultivate, Elevate. And we're going to be talking part 2, picking up where we left off. I'll make sure that his segment is up there for you guys in the feature section to check out so you can kind of keep up with us. But in the meantime, go to Roku, guys. We are on Roku, and the archive will also go to Roku. So don't limit yourself to just the internet. Go to Roku. Anyway, good night, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we shall see you next week